It was 3 a.m. when the roar of the bulldozer shattered the stillness of the night. Claire Bennett stood frozen in her slippers, clutching a steaming mug of coffee, as the mechanical beast tore through her front gate like it was made of paper. The sound of splintering wood and crumbling brick echoed through the quiet suburban neighborhood, but no one came to help. No one dared. By sunrise, her home, a modest two-story house with a white picket fence, was reduced to a pile of rubble. And all because she had locked her gate. Claire Bennett wasn't your typical state senator. While most politicians in Texas flaunted their power with sprawling mansions and flashy cars, Claire preferred to live modestly. Her home in the upscale Willow Creek neighborhood was a deliberate choice. She wanted to stay connected to the people she served, to understand their struggles firsthand. But she also had a secret. No one in Willow Creek knew she was a state senator. To them, she was just Claire, the quiet woman who kept to herself and always had a kind word for her neighbors. Claire's anonymity was a shield. It allowed her to observe the inner workings of her community without the weight of her title. But it also made her a target. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association, HOA, led by the iron-fisted Robert Hayes, was notorious for its draconian rules and petty power plays. Claire had heard the whispers, stories of fines for unapproved paint colors, threats over misplaced trash bins, and even a family forced to remove their children's treehouse because it violated aesthetic guidelines. She had brushed it off as exaggerated gossip. Until now, it started with a simple decision. Claire had always been security conscious, a habit born from years of public service. After a series of late-night package thefts in the neighborhood, she decided to install a sturdy lock on her front gate. It wasn't an eyesore. In fact, the wrought iron gate with its intricate scrollwork added a touch of elegance to her property. But it was a lock, and in Willow Creek, that was enough to set off alarm bells. The first notice arrived in her mailbox a week later. It was printed on crisp HOA letterhead, signed by Robert Hayes himself. Dear resident, it has come to our attention that your property is in violation of HOA bylaws, specifically Section 12.3. All gates must remain unlocked and accessible during daylight hours. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $500 per day until the violation is rectified. Claire rolled her eyes. She had read the HOA bylaws when she moved in, and while they were absurdly detailed, she didn't recall anything about locked gates. She tossed the notice in the trash and went about her day. The second notice came 3 days later, this time hand-delivered by a stern-looking man in a suit. Claire recognized him as one of Hayes' lackeys. "This is your final warning," the man said, his tone dripping with condescension. "The HOA takes these matters very seriously." Claire smiled politely but said nothing. She had dealt with bullies before, both in the political arena and in her personal life. She knew better than to engage. But the HOA wasn't done. Over the next week, the notices kept coming, each one more threatening than the last. The fines escalated to $1,000 a day, then $2,000. Claire ignored them all. She had bigger things to worry about, like the upcoming vote on a bill to reform HOAs statewide. The bill, which she had personally drafted, aimed to curb the abuses of power that organizations like Willow Creek's HOA thrived on. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. Claire was preparing dinner when her doorbell rang. She opened the door to find Robert Hayes standing on her porch, flanked by 2 other HOA board members. "Ms. Bennett," Hayes began, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "We've tried to resolve this matter amicably, but you've left us no choice. The HOA has voted to take decisive action." Claire crossed her arms, her patience wearing thin. "And what exactly does that mean?" Hayes smiled, a cold, calculated expression that sent a shiver down her spine. "It means we're going to enforce the bylaws. Your gate will be removed, and your property will be brought into compliance, by any means necessary." Claire laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "You're going to tear down my gate because I locked it? That's ridiculous." Hayes' smile didn't waver. "It's not just about the gate, Ms. Bennett. It's about setting an example. We can't have residents thinking they're above the rules." Claire slammed the door in his face. She wasn't worried. Let them try. She had dealt with far worse than a petty HOA. The next few days were eerily quiet. No more notices, no more visits. Claire almost forgot about the whole ordeal. She was busy preparing for a town hall meeting where she planned to unveil her HOA reform bill. The meeting was set for Friday evening, and she was looking forward to finally revealing her true identity to her neighbors. But the HOA had other plans. On Thursday night, Claire returned home late from a committee meeting. She was exhausted, her mind buzzing with the details of the upcoming vote. She barely noticed the faint hum of machinery in the distance as she climbed into bed. It wasn't until the sound grew louder, closer, that she realized something was wrong. Claire shot out of bed, her heart pounding. She grabbed her robe and rushed to the window, just in time to see the bulldozer plow through her front gate. The machine was massive, its yellow frame illuminated by the harsh glare of floodlights. Behind it stood a small group of people, Hayes and his cronies, watching with smug satisfaction. Claire's first instinct was to call the police, but she stopped herself. She knew how this would play out. The HOA had the law on their side, or at least their twisted interpretation of it. No, she needed a different approach. As the bulldozer continued its rampage, reducing her home to rubble, Claire made a silent vow. This wasn't just about her house anymore. This was about justice, and she was going to make sure the Willow Creek HOA paid for what they had done. Little did they know they had just picked a fight with the wrong woman. The sun rose over Willow Creek, casting a golden glow on the wreckage of Claire Bennett's home. The once charming two-story house was now a jagged pile of splintered wood, shattered glass, and twisted metal. The bulldozer had done its job thoroughly, leaving nothing but a gaping hole where her front gate once stood. Claire stood amidst the ruins, her arms crossed, her face a mask of calm fury. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, too afraid to step outside. The HOA had made its point, and the message was clear. No one was above their rules. But Claire wasn't just anyone. Claire's security cameras had captured everything. The footage showed the bulldozer rolling in at 3 a.m., its headlights cutting through the darkness like a predator's eyes. Robert Hayes stood nearby, arms crossed, barking orders to the operator. The other HOA board members lingered in the background, their faces illuminated by the harsh glow of their phones as they recorded the destruction. Claire downloaded the footage and saved it to multiple devices. She also found the final notice from the HOA, buried under a pile of debris. It was dated just hours before the bulldozer arrived, warning her of immediate enforcement action if she didn't comply. The notice was signed by Hayes, his signature a bold, arrogant scrawl. She smiled grimly. They had no idea what was coming. The Willow Creek Town Hall was packed that Friday evening. Residents filled the seats, murmuring nervously as they waited for the meeting to begin. The agenda had been vague, listing only community updates as the main topic. But everyone knew why they were really there. The news of Claire's home being bulldozed had spread like wildfire, and the neighborhood was buzzing with speculation. Claire arrived late, slipping in through a side door. She wore a simple blazer and slacks, her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She carried a laptop under one arm and a folder of documents in the other. The room fell silent as she walked to the front, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Robert Hayes was already at the podium, his usual smug expression firmly in place. "Ah, Ms. Bennett," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "We were just discussing your unfortunate situation. Perhaps now you understand the importance of following the rules." Claire ignored him, setting her laptop on the table and plugging it into the projector. The screen behind her flickered to life, displaying the HOA's final notice in bold, unmistakable letters. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and commanding, "my name is Claire Bennett, and I am your state senator." The room erupted in gasps. Hayes's face went pale. Claire let the revelation sink in before continuing. "For the past year, I've lived among you, not as a politician, but as a neighbor. I wanted to understand the challenges you face, to see firsthand how our laws affect your daily lives. And what I've seen has been eye-opening." She clicked to the next slide, showing a montage of security footage. The bulldozer tearing through her gate, Hayes and his cronies watching with cold indifference. The pile of rubble that was once her home. This, she said, pointing to the screen, is what happens when power goes unchecked. When a group of individuals decides they are above the law, above decency, above humanity. The Willow Creek HOA has terrorized this community for far too long. And it ends tonight. Hayes tried to interrupt, his voice trembling with rage. This is outrageous. You can't just... Sit down, Mr. Hayes, Claire snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. You've had your say. Now it's my turn. She turned back to the crowd, her expression softening. I know many of you have been afraid to speak out. Afraid of retaliation, of losing your homes, your peace of mind. But you're not alone anymore. Together, we will hold the HOA accountable for their actions. And we will make sure this never happens again. She unveiled her HOA reform bill detailing its provisions, limits on fines, mandatory transparency, and a ban on enforcement actions like the one that destroyed her home. The crowd erupted in applause, their fear giving way to hope. As the meeting adjourned, Hayes stormed up to Claire, his face red with fury. You think you've won? He spat. You're just one person. The HOA has lawyers, connections, money. You can't beat us. Claire smiled, a cold, calculating smile that made Hayes take a step back. You're right, Mr. Hayes. I am just one person, but I'm a person with the full weight of the law behind me. And I'm not alone. She gestured to the crowd, now buzzing with energy and determination. These people? They're my witnesses. Your days of bullying and intimidation are over. And if you try to retaliate against any of them, I'll make sure you regret it. Hayes opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, the man who had ruled Willow Creek with an iron fist looked scared. That night, Claire sat in a borrowed chair amidst the ruins of her home, her laptop balanced on her knees. She drafted a press release detailing the events of the past week and announcing her intention to push the HOA reform bill through the state legislature. She attached the security footage and the HOA's final notice, ensuring there would be no doubt about what had happened. As she hit send, she felt a strange sense of calm. The fight was far from over, but she had struck the first blow. And she wasn't going to stop until justice was served. Little did she know, the storm she had unleashed was about to sweep far beyond Willow Creek. By morning, Claire Bennett's press release had gone viral. News outlets across the country picked up the story, their headlines screaming in bold, accusatory fonts. State Senator's home bulldozed by HOA in midnight raid. Power gone mad, the Willow Creek HOA scandal. From rubble to reform, Claire Bennett's fight for justice. The security footage was everywhere, on TV, social media, even international news. Robert Hayes's face, cold and unfeeling as he watched the bulldozer destroy Claire's home, became the symbol of HOA tyranny. The public outcry was immediate and deafening. Claire's phone rang nonstop. Reporters, activists, even fellow politicians wanted to hear her story. She gave interviews from the ruins of her home, her voice steady but her eyes blazing with determination. This isn't just about me, she said in one particularly viral clip. This is about every family who's been bullied, every homeowner who's lived in fear. The Willow Creek HOA is just one example of a system that's broken. And it's time to fix it. The fallout was swift. The Texas Attorney General's office announced a full investigation into the Willow Creek HOA, citing egregious abuses of power. Subpoenas were issued and Hayes and his board members were called to testify. Claire, meanwhile, worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She met with lawmakers, lobbied for support, and drafted amendments to strengthen her reform bill. She also reached out to other victims of HOA overreach, collecting their stories and compiling them into a damning report. One story stood out, a single mother who had been fined $10,000 for painting her door the wrong shade of blue. Another involved an elderly couple forced to remove a ramp for their disabled grandson because it violated aesthetic guidelines. Each story added fuel to the fire, turning Claire's personal fight into a national movement. The hearing was held in a packed courtroom in downtown Austin. Claire sat at the plaintiff's table, her laptop open and her notes neatly organized. Across the room, Hayes and his lawyers looked increasingly nervous. The proceedings began with Claire's testimony. She spoke calmly but passionately, detailing the events that led to the destruction of her home. She presented the security footage, the HOA's final notice, and the mountain of evidence she had gathered. This wasn't just about a locked gate, she said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. This was about power. The power to intimidate, to control, to destroy. And it has to stop. Hayes took the stand next, his arrogance crumbling under the weight of the evidence. He tried to justify the HOA's actions, claiming they were necessary to maintain community standards. But his excuses fell flat. The final blow came when Claire's lawyer played a recording of a private HOA meeting obtained through a whistleblower. In it, Hayes could be heard bragging about teaching Claire a lesson and showing the neighborhood who's in charge. The courtroom erupted in outrage. The judge's ruling was unequivocal. The Willow Creek HOA was found guilty of multiple violations, including destruction of property, harassment, and abuse of power. Hayes and his board members were ordered to pay restitution to Claire and other victims, and the HOA was placed under state supervision. But the victory didn't end there. Claire's reform bill, now dubbed the Bennett Act, gained unprecedented support. Lawmakers who had once dismissed her efforts now clamor to co-sponsor the bill. Even the governor, initially hesitant to wade into the controversy, publicly endorsed it. In the weeks that followed, Claire became a national icon. Her story inspired countless others to speak out against HOA abuses, and similar reform efforts began popping up in other states. She was invited to speak at conferences, write op-eds, and even appear on late-night talk shows. But Claire remained focused on her mission. She used her newfound platform to push for even broader reforms, including stricter oversight of HOAs and stronger protections for homeowners. As for Hayes, he became a pariah. Stripped of his position and facing mounting legal fees, he was forced to sell his home and move out of Willow Creek. The once powerful HOA president was now a cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when power goes unchecked. Claire's home was rebuilt thanks to a crowdfunding campaign that raised over $500,000. The new house was a symbol of resilience, its sturdy walls and reinforced gate a testament to Claire's determination. On the day she moved back in, Claire hosted a small gathering for her neighbors. They brought food, shared stories, and celebrated not just her victory, but their collective freedom from the HOA's tyranny. As the sun set over Willow Creek, Claire stood on her porch, looking out at the neighborhood she had fought so hard to protect. The fight wasn't over, she knew that. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. And she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same courage and determination that had brought her this far. The Bennett Act passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, a rare feat in the often divided Texas legislature. The bill, now law, imposed strict limits on HOA powers, mandated transparency in their operations, and established a state oversight committee to handle complaints. It also included a provision that prohibited HOAs from taking enforcement actions like the one that had destroyed Claire's home. The signing ceremony was held on the steps of the Texas state capitol. Claire stood beside the governor, her face radiant with pride as he put pen to paper. A crowd of supporters cheered, their signs reading, "Thank you, Claire," and "Homeowners' rights matter." "This is a victory for every Texan," Claire said in her speech. "For every family who's been bullied, every homeowner who's lived in fear, this law is your shield." It's a reminder that no one is above the law, not even those who think they can hide behind a title or a gavel. The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the streets of Austin. The impact of the Bennett Act was felt far beyond Texas. News of the law spread like wildfire, inspiring similar reforms in other states. Claire became a sought-after speaker, traveling the country to share her story and advocate for homeowners' rights. In Willow Creek, the changes were immediate. The new HOA board, elected by the residents, prioritized transparency and community input. Fines were reduced, rules were relaxed, and the neighborhood began to feel like a community again. Claire's neighbors, once too afraid to speak out, now greeted her with smiles and gratitude. "You've given us our voices back," one elderly woman told her, tears in her eyes. One of the most surprising developments came from within the HOA itself. A former board member, emboldened by the new law, came forward with evidence of financial misconduct. The whistleblower revealed that Hayes and his cronies had been embezzling HOA funds for years, using the money to fund lavish vacations and expensive cars. The revelation led to a second wave of investigations, this time targeting the HOA's finances. Hayes, already facing legal troubles, was hit with additional charges of fraud and embezzlement. His downfall was swift and public, a stark contrast to the power he had once wielded. Claire's rebuilt home became a symbol of resilience and hope. The new house was designed to reflect her values, strong, welcoming, and unapologetically hers. The front gate, now reinforced and adorned with a plaque that read "Protected by the Bennett Act," stood as a reminder of the battle she had fought and won. Inside, the walls were lined with photos and mementos from her journey. A framed copy of the Bennett Act hung in the living room, a gift from her colleagues in the legislature. The kitchen, always the heart of the home, was stocked with treats from grateful neighbors. Claire often hosted gatherings, her home filled with laughter and conversation. It was a far cry from the quiet, solitary life she had led before. but she wouldn't have it any other way. Claire's fight didn't end with the Bennett Act. She continued to push for broader reforms, including affordable housing initiatives and stronger protections for renters. Her work earned her national recognition, including a prestigious award for civic leadership. But for Claire, the real reward was seeing the impact of her efforts. She received letters from homeowners across the country thanking her for giving them the courage to stand up to abusive HOAs. One letter from a young couple in Florida read, "Because of you, we didn't lose our home. Because of you, we have hope. Thank you for being our voice when we couldn't speak." As Claire stood on her porch one evening watching the sunset over Willow Creek, she reflected on how far she had come. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had also been worth it. She had turned her pain into purpose, her loss into a legacy. And she knew that her work wasn't done. There were still battles to fight, still injustices to right. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of peace, a moment to savor the victory she had fought so hard to achieve. The neighborhood was quiet, the streets bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, the sound pure and unburdened. Claire smiled, her heart full. This was what she had fought for. This was what mattered. And she would keep fighting for as long as it took to protect it.